For 6,000 years, the stars had been silent of war. Humanity and the Galactic Empire had abided by treaties so old that most no longer remembered the taste of battle. Across that vast stretch of time, children were born, worlds flourished, and suspicion was kept buried under ceremonial handshakes and endless councils. Peace became not just a condition, but a myth, a promise that the cosmos itself would never again tremble under fire. And yet, peace, like love, was only as strong as the trust that bound it. When the Empire's ships appeared above the outer colony of Lithera, no alarms sounded at first. Their banners were recognized, their captains greeted as allies. Parents walked their children to schools while merchant ships traded fruit and steel, believing themselves safe under the oldest pact ever forged. By nightfall, that faith was broken. Transports descended like silent predators, and before any distress signal could be answered, every child of Lithera was gone. No ransom was demanded, no explanation offered. The Empire simply left, taking with them the most sacred lives a people could possess. The news traveled faster than light itself, carried not by transmissions, but by the shared gasp of disbelief that passed through every human heart. Peace shattered in an instant, and with its collapse came the corrosive feeling of betrayal, a sensation far older and sharper than hatred. Humanity had not merely been attacked, it had been deceived, its trust abused in the most intimate way possible. It was the wound of a lover discovering a hidden affair, the kind of betrayal that turns love into poison. Commander Elias Kane stood at the heart of that storm. A man forged in an era where wars were studied in academies rather than fought in space, he had long doubted the Empire's sincerity. Still, he had raised his children under the safety of treaties, spoken at diplomatic ceremonies with the calm voice of duty, and reassured his wife that peace was eternal. His iron features concealed a restless mind, but not even he had anticipated the abduction of the innocent. For him, duty now carried a bitter taste. He was tasked not only with leading the first war in millennia, but with reconciling the fractures within his own home. Adira Kane had loved Elias since youth, long before he wore a uniform. She had stood by him during years of endless negotiations, trusting in his loyalty, even as his hours grew longer and his presence colder. But whispers had reached her. Stories of private meetings, unusual absences, and above all, the name of one woman, Selene Vera. Selene was no ordinary diplomat. She had been born into the Empire, yet seemed carved from contradictions, graceful yet cunning, warm yet veiled in secrets. Years earlier, she and Elias had found themselves drawn together during the fragile drafting of a border treaty. What began as shared confidences beneath sterile council lights grew into something far more dangerous. For Elias, it was a lapse, a fleeting surrender to longing in a life otherwise commanded by duty. For Selene, it was perhaps more, though neither dared name it. The affair had ended, or so Elias told himself, sealed away like a classified document never to be opened. But betrayal has a way of echoing through time. When Selene appeared again as a representative of the Empire, her presence cut through Elias's resolve. She stood in the council chamber with the same unreadable eyes, delivering the Empire's empty condolences for Lithera. Her words were polished, but Elias could hear the cracks beneath them. She knew more than she admitted, and though she tried to mask it, sorrow flickered across her face. For Elias, the memory of their shared nights returned with unbearable clarity. Threatening to drown the fury he should have directed solely at her people. Adira saw it all. She saw the way Elias's eyes lingered a moment too long, the way his jaw clenched not with hatred but with something more complicated. She had always suspected, but suspicion is one thing and confirmation is another. Her trust in him began to unravel, thread by thread, as surely as peace between humanity and empire collapsed. In her mind, the abduction of children and the secrecy of infidelity became one and the same crime, a violation of sacred bonds. The human council gathered, debating with frantic voices whether to break the ancient treaty. Some urged restraint, fearful of awakening a war that could consume galaxies. But parents cried out in fury, demanding action. Crowds filled the streets of Earth cities, their chants echoing like battle drums. Bring them back. Break the chains. End the betrayal. It was not strategy that forced the Council's hand, but the simple, undeniable weight of outrage. Elias, chosen as Supreme Commander of the fleet, knew the burden before him. He would carry humanity into war. But even as he stood in the war room beneath maps of stars, he carried a war within his chest. Adira confronted him one night as the fleet prepared for launch. Her voice was quiet, but her words cut deeper than any blade. "Do you fight for our children?" she asked, "or for her?" He tried to deny, to insist his duty was pure, but silence betrayed him. For in his heart, he knew the war was no longer simple. It was not just humanity against empire, nor husband against wife. It was the collision of loyalties between blood and desire, between past sins and present vows. As the fleet departed Earth, engines igniting like vengeful stars, Elias stood upon the command deck with his eyes fixed on the void. The soldiers around him thought only of reclaiming the stolen young, of avenging peace. But within Elias, two battles raged, one fought with ships and weapons, and another with memory and guilt. For every path he chose, someone he loved would bleed. The stars ahead were no longer silent. They whispered promises of fire, of truth revealed, of debts long overdue. Humanity had broken 6,000 years of peace, but Elias Kane had broken something far more fragile. The War of Worlds had begun, and so too had the War of Hearts. The war began not with thunder, but with silence. The void between stars, once a cradle of trust, now became a hunting ground where fleets stalked one another through shadows. Humanity, long shackled by restraint, unleashed its fury in coordinated strikes across border worlds. Ships that had once patrolled peacefully now carried missiles primed to burn through Imperial steel. For every colony that had lost a child, 1,000 soldiers fought with vengeance in their veins. Yet for Commander Elias Kane, the soundless blaze of war was only an echo of the storm inside his own heart. Victory came swiftly at first. The Empire, stunned by humanity's sudden defiance, lost several outposts before mounting a response. Reports poured into the command deck. Liberated settlements, captured stations, survivors weeping with joy as human banners replaced Imperial sigils. Soldiers whispered that Kane was a man of destiny, chosen to avenge the betrayed. Yet each victory brought him no peace. In quiet hours, when the lights of the war room dimmed, his thoughts drifted to Selene Vera. Somewhere beyond the next battlefield, she served as the Empire's voice, bound by duty as he was. Duty had brought them together once, and it now placed them on opposite sides of a conflict neither of them had truly wanted. Adira watched her husband with eyes that no longer glowed with love, but with suspicion sharpened into certainty. His distance, his silences, the way his gaze seemed to drift into memory rather than the present, all of it confirmed what she had long feared. She no longer asked him about Selene. Questions were unnecessary when answers already hung heavy in the air between them. Their conversations, once filled with warmth and shared dreams, had withered into brittle exchanges about strategy and appearances. She supported his cause publicly, for she too wanted the children returned, but privately her heart fractured with every passing day. The breaking point arrived during a lull in the war. Elias, summoned under the guise of negotiation, found himself alone with Selene in a neutral orbiting station carved from polished stone and glass. The galaxy outside shimmered like spilled jewels, but neither saw the beauty of it. Their eyes were only for each other. Selene's voice, once a weapon of diplomacy, carried only sorrow now. She confessed that not all within the Empire had agreed to the abductions. Factions warred even within their own ranks, and she had fought in vain to prevent the act that shattered peace. Her words trembled with sincerity, yet Elias heard more than her explanation. He heard the echo of their forbidden past. He should have condemned her. He should have walked away with fury, carrying her confession as evidence of the Empire's corruption. Yet, as she spoke, his mind betrayed him, recalling whispered conversations in dim chambers, the softness of her laugh, the dangerous comfort they had once shared. For a moment, standing beneath the eternal stars, he was no commander, no husband, no father of a wounded people. He was simply a man torn between two halves of his soul. But wars do not pause for longing. News of the meeting spread quickly, carried by rumor and by those who watched too closely. Adira confronted him when he returned, her voice breaking though she tried to hold it steady. She accused him not only of betraying her, but of betraying every parent who had placed their faith in him. How could he lead them against an enemy whose emissary had once been his lover? How could he claim to fight for their children while clinging to the shadow of another woman? Her tears fell like silent indictments, each one striking him harder than any weapon could. Elias, who had faced fleets without trembling, found himself unable to speak. His silence confirmed what she already knew. The war escalated. The Empire retaliated with brutal force, striking human fleets with weapons unseen in centuries. Planets burned, and for every child rescued, thousands perished. Humanity's determination hardened, yet behind their courage was despair. Elias led them with iron precision, but whispers grew louder. Was his judgment clouded, his heart compromised? Soldiers who once hailed him as savior now watched him with wary eyes, uncertain if his loyalties lay wholly with them. Selene herself became a symbol of that uncertainty. Messages intercepted from Imperial channels hinted at her fall from favor, her influence stripped by rivals who despised her sympathy toward humans. Yet she continued to appear at negotiations, her presence haunting Elias like a wound that would not heal. When their paths crossed again on a shattered moon where parley was attempted, their words were few, but laden with unspoken weight. She urged him to end the war before it devoured both peoples. He answered only with silence, torn between desire and duty. Adira, watching her husband from afar, felt her heart grow colder with each of these encounters. She had given her life to him, borne his children, believed in his honor. Now she lived with the knowledge that his soul wandered elsewhere, tethered by invisible threads to a woman who was not her. Yet even in her despair, she loved him still, which made the pain unbearable. She knew the war for the children could be won, but her marriage, like the treaty between worlds, might never recover. The final push came when intelligence revealed the location of the abducted children, hidden within a fortress world deep inside Imperial territory. Humanity poured every remaining resource into the assault, knowing the cost would be catastrophic. As fleets assembled, Elias stood at the center, the embodiment of both hope and division. Adira approached him one last time before battle, her voice stripped of anger, carrying only exhaustion. She asked him to choose, not with words, but with his actions. Would he fight for the innocent and for the family still waiting for him, or would he let himself be consumed by the ghost of forbidden love? The battle was apocalyptic. Stars themselves seemed to scream as ships tore each other apart. Humanity's forces pressed forward with relentless sacrifice, determined to reclaim what was stolen. Amid the chaos, Elias found clarity. He chose not Selene, not the fragile echo of a past desire, but the children his own, and those of every parent who had lost hope. With ruthless precision, he led the assault that breached the fortress and freed the captives, even as fleets around him were annihilated. Selene vanished in the aftermath. Some claimed she had been recalled in disgrace, others whispered she had fled into exile. Elias never knew the truth. He only knew that when the final survivors returned with the rescued children, she was gone, and with her, the last remnants of temptation. Humanity hailed him as a hero, the man who broke 6,000 years of peace to save the innocent. Songs were written, monuments built, but for Elias, there was no triumph in his heart. The children were returned, but millions of others had perished. Peace was lost, trust was shattered, and within his own home, the damage could not be undone. Adira welcomed their children back with tears of joy, but she did not embrace her husband. The bond between them had been broken too deeply, scarred by both war and betrayal. They stood side by side for the world, united in appearance, but within their hearts lay an emptiness no victory could fill,